Howdy do goody two shoes, guide sorcery speaking, and if I seem a little quiet, it's because the rest of my family is now a little bit asleep. Teensy bit. It is currently 3:30 in the morning. And I really should be asleep. I have a flight to catch in a few hours, but I wanted to get this out of the way before I leave for vacation. So what we're talking about today, the topic du jour is battle Ghetsis, which is the theme that plays when you battle Ghetsis in the father or foe story event in Pokemon Masters EX. Now, um, I actually have been very hesitant to look at this and analyze this track because I actually missed out on Gen 5 when I was a kid. I was not able to play Black and White or Black 2 White 2. I still haven't been able to play them, but I do know the story. I've seen playthroughs and I read the manga, so I'd say I'm kind of familiar with the story at this point. But if once again, I encourage you, if I miss anything, please let me know in the comments. If you read something a little bit differently than I did, please let me know in the comments. I also do not claim to be any sort of I do not claim to be a huge expert on music theory, or even on Pokemon in general. I just hesitate to call myself an expert in that regard. So please let me know if there is anything that you think I missed or that you would like to have heard. Let me just move my move my headset a bit. Last time I recorded this, none of it got captured because my headset accidentally came unplugged. So I gotta make sure it stays unplugged. Stays plugged in, I mean. Anyway, so let me just pull up some notes here. So some background before we get started. Ghetsis is the secret leader of Team Plasma, the mastermind and true leader. He is evil through and through, very vile, one of the, if not the most evil villain in Pokemon history, even in comparison to Giovanni. He is a master manipulator. He manipulated N twice, once in Black and White and once in Black 2 White 2. Um, and it's very interesting because Team Plasma is at its heart a beneficent organization of sorts. They still they still hinder the player, but they're looking out for truly noble causes, trying to liberate Pokemon from people thinking that Pokemon are being oppressed and abused by people. Um, and this is a well-meaning cause, but Ghetsis manipulates Team Plasma in order to make sure that all Pokemon are separated from humans, so that he can be the only one with Pokemon and therefore the most powerful, and therefore able to take over the world. And the version of Ghetsis in Masters is his. It looks like his version from Black 2 White 2. My hypothesis is actually that this version of Ghetsis is slightly before the events of Black 2 White 2. He is not quite so unhinged. He's still very, very much unhinged, but he doesn't lose himself like he loses himself in Black 2 White 2. And he still has elements of his Black and White incarnation. He is in Black 2 White 2, like, he's still that master manipulator, but he's not as good at controlling his underlings as he is in Black and White. Colress and Zinzolin are very difficult for him to control, whereas N, he was very, very easily able to take advantage of him in the Black and White. And in Masters, he manages to successfully manipulate N, but he also tries to manipulate Giovanni. And another thing, I'm pretty sure this version of Ghetsis is not the Rainbow Rocket version of Ghetsis. He has not met Giovanni before. Um, Giovanni, being the Rainbow Rocket version, knows who this person is and has met him and knows how he operates. Um, and several things that make Ghetsis, really just honestly, like, even surpassing Giovanni in terms of like just how evil he is. He First of all, you only fight him once per game. He only fights when there's no other option, and he fights with no sense of honor. He fights to kill. Um, in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, he straight up tries to kill Lily. Um, I've seen some people online say that he tries to kill, threatens to kill the player in Black 2 White 2. The English translation only says that he chooses to freeze the player in place so that he can watch him ascend to power. But it is possible that the original Japanese script did not say that, was a lot darker. Who knows? But yeah, that makes him very much like very a lot darker than the other villains. The other villains have a sense of honor, even like when they're defeated, even when they're working towards a really big cause. They still like whenever they're defeated, it's like, oh, haha, I'm legitimately impressed. Like, I may not, our clash of wills has ended and you have won. Um, like I will, maybe they give up on their dream, maybe they don't give up on their dream, but ultimately they, admit that the player has won. Ghetsis never does that. Ghetsis always goes under some sort of breakdown when he loses. Um, and his partner's Kira freezes itself over in order to keep its power from leaking out. And the idea behind Kyurem teaming up with Ghetsis is that Ghetsis might be able to pressure Kyurem to allow itself to go all out, and we might see bits and pieces of that hinted at in the music that we're about to listen to. So let me get this out of the way for y'all. So the battle Ghetsis, Pokemon Masters EX. Once again, credit to Jay for posting this 15-minute extended high quality version. If you are looking for high quality versions of the Pokemon Masters soundtrack, Jay is definitely the person to go. Really, 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 really great rips. So the tempo of this piece is 150. Uh, kind of in line, pretty similar, if not identical, to his Black 2 White 2 theme. I Before I go any further, I want to say that any any meaning that I draw from the track is entirely subjective and kind of conjecture-ish a little bit. I like it's very difficult for me to assign intention to the composer, but I wanted to do my best to show where the inspiration for some of these tracks came from, where they appear in other games, and maybe even like try to analyze them from a theoretical standpoint a little bit. So um, tempo is 150. The version of Battle Ghetsis that appears in Masters is based off his Black 2 White 2 battle theme, which we'll talk about at length. And the reason for that being, of course, this version of Ghetsis is from Black 2 White 2. In Black and White, he is much more regal. He fancies himself a king. He thinks that he's going to become a god, and he doesn't have as much of a mental breakdown as he does in Black 2 White 2, which takes place a few years later. At this point, Ghetsis has lost so much. He's sick of losing. He's losing himself. He's losing his stability mentally. And this battle theme reflects that. It reflects his descent into madness and his almost reckless, uh, his almost reckless charge towards his goal. Which is it's very interesting how it does that, and we'll take a look at that as we go. Also, I don't know, the tempo being 150, the original 151, the idea of gotta catch 'em all but twisted, but no, that's definitely me reading too much into it. Now, it's really difficult to put this into a key. The intro starts in C sharp minor, but then the main body jumps from B minor, F sharp minor, C minor in the end, and then back to B minor. Oh, I completely forgot to mention one thing about Ghetsis is his name. His name is Junichi Masuda, who had a big hand in creating pretty much all the main series Pokemon games, has mentioned that Ghetsis' name comes from the German words for G and C sharp. So G in German would be Ge, and then C sharp in German is Cis. So G, C sharp, Ghetsis. Now, the G C sharp interval uh, sounds a little bit like this. As you can hear, that's not very pleasant. That is what we call a tritone, and that is one of the most unsettling sounds that you can make with the Western 12 tone octave. And that is because well, it's obviously, what's the word? It's dissonant, obviously. But the in the Renaissance, this tritone was known as the devil's interval, and it was actually, you were not allowed to use it. It was very much, you don't use it. It's, bad luck and whatnot, and that's because it does not resolve. It has to go up or it has to go down, and like just hanging there by itself, it does not resolve, and it's desperately trying to get it to be resolved. So, in other words, Ghetsis was literally named after a musical interval known as the Devil's Interval. So sit on that, and you will also notice that this interval, specifically the C sharp interval, actually appears a lot in his themes throughout the years. So we'll take a look at that as we go. So that being said, let's get right into it. Time signature is 4/4, which is pretty standard. Let's get right into the intro. Now, right off the bat, we have the chanting, which is, very, which is just iconic at this point. Everyone who's heard Ghetsis' theme knows this part of his track really well. Now, interestingly enough, the full choir is chanting Ghetsis in unison right off the bat here in this intro, which is very interesting. In Black and White, Ghetsis only has basses chanting his name, and in Black 2 White 2, the basses start off the piece and eventually has some interplay with the treble. I'll play the Black 2 White 2 version of his theme, and you'll hear in the intro there isn't so much of the treble present. And I should mention that the DS sound font makes it really difficult to determine sometimes when a part is performed by treble vocals or if it's performed by other instruments. But I find this distinction very interesting. I feel like it kind of hints at Ghetsis picking up where he left off in Black 2 White 2. In Black and White, the chanting his name, the basses being underneath everything, and being the only voices present and chanting his name, I feel like hint at him hiding behind a much more noble cause, hiding behind the cause of Team Plasma and N as its leader, and only coming out when it was evident that his plans might fail. And here, we don't need all that. We know Ghetsis is evil already. He makes no attempt to hide it otherwise, so he can go all out at this point. And in a similar, I feel like it's the choice of voice here, this specific change, I feel like is kind of similar to why they played the crowd chant part of the Galar Gym Leader theme in Masters first, rather than the typical intro that you hear in Sword and Shield. I feel like at this point, anyone who has played Black and White and Black 2 White 2 know this chant better than anything else in the piece. And this is the composer's way of saying, you know what's about to happen, let's just get right to it, and it's such a small change. But I feel like it really emphasizes the fact that this is the same Ghetsis that you fought back then, and you're going to fight him again now, in this different and new context. Get ready for all the nostalgia feels, etc. If you can feel nostalgia amidst the terror, So it's a very interesting change, and I still haven't really completely worked out my thoughts on it, but I still really like it. So let's get to the first section after the intro. Okay, so that was also taken from Black 2 White 2. As you can hear, we have the vocals above. The treble vocals finally come in, vocalizing with in tandem with another melody played by the guitars. And the rhythm is very, very fast, very, very frantic. You could hear a little bit of a clashing noise in the Black 2 White 2, and people like to say that that was Ghetsis slamming his cane down. That is not present here in Masters, which is a bit of a shame. But what is interesting about this particular portion is you'll notice, like, first of all, the Ghetsis chants. They were not tritones, they were a minor second apart. Ghetsis, Ghetsis. And what the effect that this achieves is it first of all, the minor second is also a very dissonant chord, probably second fiddle if not equal to the tritone. It like it it's and anything that is a minor second away from the tonic chord tends to want to resolve to the tonic chord. That is why the seventh resolves to the eighth and the four resolves to the three, um, or to the five. Some usually to the three, but the presence of minor seconds and that's a chromatic step essentially. It's a half step, and this section is just full of it. Let's give it another listen real quick. And you'll notice another thing, that the two melodies are kind of distinct from each other, but they follow each other to an extent. The I actually had to write it down because I was I just wanted to visualize it in my head. So the top part is undergoing the stepwise motion. It goes bum 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 bum. Meanwhile, the bass underneath it, the left hand, is only follows the yeah, just closely follows the upper line, but it's ultimately its own thing, and it also is very much based on half step based motion. But what's interesting is that at certain points that tritone comes back, right? Whenever the higher voice hits a G, almost certainly you can say that the lower voice has hit a C sharp. So that interval is like pretty much like it pops up a lot in that segment, and it's really unsettling. And another thing is, like, it is very, very difficult to place this in in any given key. So all of this just really hints to the to Ghetsis being just the worst. He has no foundation for his, no logical or beneficial foundation for his actions. He is very easily shaken. He is very easily he very easily breaks essentially. And that I find really, really fascinating. And of course, the chromaticisms and the tritone, in this case, like, really work to amp up the threat that this man poses to the region and to the world. So a lot of stuff going on over there. Really, really cool. But for now, let's go ahead and let's head into the next section. So that sort of this sort of simmering series of notes is also present here in the Black 2 White 2 Ghetsis battle theme, but it is actually present a little bit later in the battle theme. Let's skip ahead to 41 seconds. So did you hear that? It was there. It was approximately the same tempo, should be the same notes, and it's actually also pleasant. It's also present. I mean, I suppose it's pleasant depending on how you look at it. It's also present in Ghetsis' original black and white battle theme here at second 39. You see here. See, if you would pause, thank you. The interesting thing is, in the original black and white, this was played by a harp, and it's a lot slower. Whereas in black 2, white 2, it's played by a much higher string instrument, and it's, a lot faster. And what's interesting about this is the it like it really really also makes use of that tritone, um, and it is one of the few melodic, like, non percussion parts in the first part of Ghetsis' battle theme in black and white. So it really hints, first of all, at his madness, but how he's able to keep it in control with the timpanis going on around it. Um, in the Black 2, White 2, he very much cannot keep that under control. And especially in Masters, you'll remember, if you pay attention to the choir during this part. So you'll notice that the strings, not the strings, sorry, the vocals are following a similar contour to the section prior to it, which is very fascinating. And of course, they're interrupted by Ghetsis chants with the orchestra hits alongside it. That take advantage of tritones and minor seconds, with the bass and treble specifically going in opposite directions, which is really really cool. What this ends up this ends up, of course, evoking like, you could read the split of Team Plasma into the faction that is loyal to N and the faction that is loyal to Ghetsis. You could definitely make that argument when the voices split there. Um, but of course, like, the lower voices are going down are going down a tritone, and the minor voices are going down a minor second, which is not fun for anybody. Um, and uh, the next part is an original melody, I think. And we're back to chanting. Now, here's something also very interesting. In the portion that you just heard, this is the first time that the chants have actually had a more consonant sound. The chanting has become a perfect fifth in the bass, with a minor second returning to the treble when the treble kicks in. And to me, this hints at Ghetsis' attempts to control the world. So, for context, the perfect fifth interval, there's a reason. Like, one of the first things you learn in music theory when you're writing is you don't write several perfect fifths in a row or several perfect fourths in a row, because the note will seem to will don't won't seem to have any agency. They'll be like forced to follow, essentially. And it is fascinating that Ghetsis is chanting in this area. I it's late, y'all. It's like 4 a.m. almost. But Ghetsis is the chanting of Ghetsis in this segment starts off with the perfect fifth, an interval that very much exudes control, almost too much control if you overuse it, um, and then it goes back to the minor seconds, which have been hinting at Ghetsis' instability throughout the course of the piece. And it is, I would imagine that this is a good way of portraying that Ghetsis, how he attempts to control this world so closely, even though he has such trouble controlling himself. And I find that utterly fascinating. So his next section is actually from a black and white a black and white track called Ghetsis' Ambition, which I believe only plays once in black and white and not in black 2 white 2. Ghetsis' Ambition in this case is played when you meet when before Ghetsis challenges you in End's castle. At least I think. Feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. So Ghetsis' Ambition is very, very difficult because it is actually very difficult to pinpoint a key, and that's part of the problem. Let's go ahead and give it a listen. Alright, and now let's give a listen to Ghetsis' Ambitions from Pokemon Black and White. And one of the most striking elements of this of this particular difference here is the difference in the bass. Now, the bass notes are essentially the same in both of these, except for one difference, and that is rhythm. In the Master's version of this tune, you hear the basses do repeated notes instead of one note, as it's shown here. So instead of bum bum, can I get a pitch, please? So instead of going bum 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 bum, they go bum 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 bum. And this adds the slowness of it, adds less, takes the threat and backs it off a bit. Like the black and white version is very up in your face, very much the threat is already here, but the Master's version creates an environment where you are still looking out for that shark. You know the shark is in the water somewhere. The crocodile, you can hear their tail swishing. But it's that moment, like, where you realize that you have a chance of surviving, which is not the case in black and white. And this the slightly slower track here is it just feels much more deliberate, but it also feels like Ghetsis doesn't have as much control as he used to. He doesn't have much control over himself. He is trying to hold himself together, whereas in black and white, where he is fully able to let loose all of his evil at once, because for most of the time he has been hiding beneath this veneer of Team Plasma's noble cause. In black to white 2, he does not need to hide that anymore. He can continue to let it loose. But in doing so, because he is letting loose that evil inside of him and that spite, when he loses complete control. So at this point, he has lost once. In Masters, he has, despite having successfully manipulated N, he is about to be manipulated. He actually ends up butting heads with Giovanni. He loses a lot. He is required to be saved by N and Nate in the story. So all of this seeming failure would no doubt really drive Ghetsis up the wall and really force him to almost explode. And making this theme slower really draws out that evil energy trying to be contained, essentially. And one thing I also noticed is the staccato eighth notes in the melody, in the higher voice. At least in this version, sound a bit like lead up to trumpet fairs, especially when they lead up to like drawn out notes. So let's just listen to the black and white version first. And you'll you'll notice that as the piece goes along, those staccato eighth notes leading up to long notes, instead of leading up to those long notes, they start leading more and more to other eighth notes, and that goes really, really quickly out of control. And you'll notice that the melody is very, very difficult to place in a very specific in any specific key. This, is carried over here, but the different tempo makes it a bit more difficult to describe it as, the staccato eighth notes leading up to drawn out notes that sound a bit like trumpet fanfares. It's very difficult to define it as that. And again, this kind of hints towards the idea that Ghetsis has let go of this idea of being a king or a god or like someone ruling over all in his regal attire that he had in black and white, that he really, really has no other choice but to rule from the shadows, until such time where he feels powerful enough to rule from on high. And one last thing I want to point out, and this is very, very fascinating. This applies also to the first section that we talked about, where we were introduced to the stepwise motion immediately after the intro. The more dissonant and more complex melodies tend to be played, if you were to play this on the piano, those melodies would be played on the right hand, whereas the left hand would be handling the minor thirds and the major thirds that are beneath all, the main melody. And I find this fascinating because Ghetsis not only is left-handed, but seems either unable to use his right hand or heavily, heavily handicapped in terms of his right hand. In fact, the entire right side of his body is either hidden or much less active than the left side. Like when he speaks, the left side of his mouth moves more than the right side. His right eye, of course, is covered by his visor. His right arm is always concealed beneath his cloak. You see the arm once in the opening to Pokemon Black and White, but it is actually like blackened more than the left arm is, which is really, really a really, really cool symbolism that this man is just lacking in morality. And I find it fascinating that despite that, the more complex melodies are played on the right hand, whereas the more grounded, more, the ones that actually can find a key are in the left. And I really it really makes it's really cool thought to think of like just how many tritones, because like the right hand really relies on the tritones. It relies on the it relies on those jumps, and it relies on some chromaticism, and it doesn't fall into it's very difficult to put it into any given key. It really just emphasizes how Ghetsis has no morality. He has no control over his right hand. He has no control over those emotions that are spilling out as a result of that, and that I find is really, really interesting. And now this transition part back to the loop is very interesting. It goes back to chanting and involves some perfect fifths this time. Well, you got to get there first. Now, of course, this could just be the composer's way of re-grounding the piece so that it's ready for the loop, and so that it doesn't feel too unnatural jumping from one segment to the next. That being said, the perfect fifths return here, and in full force. There is very little, I think, if any, dissonance in the chorus, which is very, very fascinating. And I feel like if the music is going to loop, it has to go back. It kind of feels like a reset, and Ghetsis would be in need of a reset if he chose, if he, well, not chose, but if he somehow lost his mind. Now, it also, the orchestra hits are very similar in contour to the Team Plasmic Front Battle. Let me go ahead and play the orchestra hits for you again. And the reason I bring this up is because the Team Plasma Grunt battle in Black and White did something very interesting. So the Team Plasma Grunt is an interesting thing for them to pull from. Of course, this could just be the composer just throwing together whatever works. It does follow a lot of conventions that are very, very widely used in Pokemon Masters. So it could entirely be just a coincidence. However, it is fascinating, this similar contour to the Team Plasma Grunt battle, with, the exception of some notes, with the exception of some rhythms, of course. And yeah, so that obviously, like, relating to his connection with Team Plasma, relating to how they managed to keep him grounded, they managed to keep him from revealing himself and being put in a very bad position in that regard. So and it should also be mentioned that the phrase is a bit reversed here. Of course, the first and third elements of the repeating notes there are identical, but the second and fourth are switched in the Masters version of Ghetsis' theme. So let's give us a listen. Notice how that went up and down like a hill, and that one went just straight up, whereas in Masters, that's not Masters. Alright, please stop. Thank you. Okay, so it goes up the hill this time. And that time it goes up and then back down. So it is fascinating that this was that while Ghetsis relies heavily on Team Plasma to do his bidding, he rarely does anything himself. He still is so fundamentally departed from Team Plasma that there's no reason for him to have the same order of of phrases that they have. So with that being said, I think that's the last of it. It goes back to the first section after this. So that's pretty much all I covered. Overall, I really, really like this theme. I think this is one of my favorite villain themes in the game, if not one of my favorite themes in the game, period. And right off the bat, the chanting Ghetsis makes it stand out from the rest. It pays homage to so much of Ghetsis' history. It pays homage to his mindset, which is as fickle as the weather in Texas. And it's such a really, really cool piece. It doesn't, it barely fits into any into any given key. Granted, Pokemon music changes a lot, and also, you know, uh, a lot of there are a lot of key changes in Pokemon music in general, but the fact that it was very difficult to even give it a key is a feat in of itself. It wasn't entirely keyless, but it still gave off that really, really cool illusion. So overall, I really like this theme. I really think it fits Ghetsis well, especially Ghetsis as he appeared at that point in time. So with that being said, I think that's all I can offer you today as of right now. I still got to film one more video. So please, I hope you're looking forward to that as well. But I'm going to get some rest real quick, so in between filming. So thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. It is perfectly free. You do not have to pay anything, unlike Twitch. And leave a comment as to what you think of Ghetsis' theme and what I should analyze next. And please follow me on Twitch if you haven't already, where I do most of my gaming stuff and charity stuff. I play Pokemon Masters on there pretty frequently, so please head on over and drop a follow if you haven't already. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Catch you next time. Smell you later.